I started when I found out the truth. It surprised me, and I felt thankful to my father-in-law. It also made me feel free. My name's Charlotte, born in April, with a name that reminds you of blooming flowers. It's been 45 years since then. I've spent my life taking care of my family as a wife and mom, enjoying every day. But there were troubles beyond my family. Back then, my family was all I needed for happiness. I met my husband, Joseph, at a club in college. We hit it off, started dating, and eventually got married. We have a son, but he works in the city and only comes home every 6 months. So it's mostly just Joseph and me now. We used to love going back to places we visited when we were dating. How about Six Flags tomorrow on our day off? Joseph suddenly asked. Caught off guard, I tried to remember what happened 23 years ago at that amusement park. Let me think. Oh, I remember. After riding the teacups, I got dizzy and fell into a nearby pond. That's right, I was so embarrassed. I almost wish I didn't know you. You're so mean. Why did you let go of my hand then? We laughed about my embarrassing moment, making it a cherished memory. Even when it was just the two of us at home, we never lost our cheerful spirit. We had a happy life. Joseph's work shifts meant we sometimes didn't see much of each other, but I adjusted my schedule to match his, so I rarely felt lonely. Then, something major happened that would change everything. Our father-in-law was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. The surgery was tough, and the chances of survival were very low. It was a terrible illness. Both Joseph and I were filled with anger, clenching our fists in frustration. When a loved one gets seriously ill, you feel lost, not knowing what to do. Joseph's sister lived in the next town over, but she didn't know about this yet. Joseph decided to call her. After 7 rings, a loud, shrill voice answered the phone. Why are you calling at this hour? I'm busy making dinner, she grumbled when Joseph called her. We need to talk about something important. We'll come over tomorrow evening, Joseph replied, ignoring her complaints. Even though she wasn't thrilled about the sudden visit, there were more important things to worry about. After giving her the necessary information, Joseph hung up. Normally, Joseph didn't pay much attention to his carefree sister-in-law. She rarely showed up at family events and didn't really get along with him. But this time was different. The next day, we quickly took time off and went to her house. When we rang the doorbell, her husband, who wasn't the friendliest person, answered first. He opened the door with a stern expression, giving us an intimidating look. It wasn't a welcoming sight. In the living room, she gave us a cold stare. Even though we hadn't seen each other in 6 months, she treated us worse than strangers. Amidst the tension, Joseph fixed his intense gaze on her. As he told her about their father's illness, she said something shocking. So what? Are you blaming Dad for getting sick? You didn't come here expecting me to take care of him, did you? Instead of feeling sad about her father's illness, she seemed more worried about inconvenience to herself. It was the first time I saw a daughter disrespect her sick father like that, and I felt embarrassed for her as a fellow human being. My anger rose, and even my parents, who had planned to speak calmly, were getting frustrated. That's too much. You're his daughter, aren't you? Even if a loved one is suffering, you can't be so cold. If the situation were reversed, you would definitely be upset. I hoped she would think about what I said and calm down. But I was wrong. Don't lecture me. There's no rule saying I have to care for him just because I'm his daughter. If you're so worried, why don't you do it? Joseph is his child too. True, Joseph is also his father's child, so it's unfair to expect his sister to shoulder all the responsibility when she's being so irresponsible. I thought she should step up and help out during this tough time. But people like her are good at finding excuses. What she said wasn't entirely wrong, and I realized it was pointless to argue further. So I let it go, even though we didn't want to league our father-in-law to his daughter, who clearly didn't want to deal with it. As a working couple, we didn't have the time. Unlike her, I found fulfillment in my job, and if Joseph had to quit, it would strain our finances. As I weighed my options, my sister-in-law revealed her trump card with a smug look on her face. Hey Charlotte, you have a nursing certification, right? You know more than me, a total amateur. It'd be best if you took care of him. Patients feel better with a professional, don't they? I had worked as a certified nursing assistant, CNA, in a nursing home 15 years ago, and got certified so I could care for my parents if needed, since I'm an only child. Knowing it would be pointless to argue with my sister-in-law further, we decided to go home and think things over. I'm sorry you have such an uncaring and troublesome sister-in-law. She's not the type to listen even if I spoke up, so I didn't say anything. It's all right. I knew no matter what you said, it wouldn't change anything. It's not your fault, Joseph. What should we do? I asked. I know you love your job, and I don't want to take that away from you just because my dad got sick. But seeing Joseph care so much about me made me happy. Unlike my sister, I'm not heartless. I want to cherish every moment with my dad, Joseph replied. Don't worry about me. I'll figure out my job situation later. What matters most is that I met you because of your dad. I'm grateful for that, I said, holding Joseph's hand as I saw the regret in his eyes. Let's face this together, I continued, seeing Joseph's expression lighten a bit. The biggest problem here is money, right? While talking with Joseph, we discovered that my father-in-law had only signed up for the cheapest insurance available. That meant we have to pay for most of his care out of our own pockets. Well, his daughters definitely won't offer to chip in, Joseph said. They should be contributing more if they're not going to help take care of him. Their lack of reliability was disheartening, even though I hadn't expected much from them to begin with. Taking care of a sick person requires finding motivation when you're at your lowest. It's not an easy task. It felt like a battle with myself. The next day, I made the tough decision to leave my job in the bar kitchen, where I enjoyed working with the younger staff. When I explained the situation, everyone understood, though they were disappointed to see me go. Please come back when you can, they said. Their words gave me strength and became my motivation for the challenges ahead. With that, I headed straight to the hospital where my father-in-law was waiting. When I arrived, I saw my father-in-law sitting quietly with his back to the entrance. I couldn't tell if he was looking out the window or sleeping, but his loneliness and sadness were palpable, and I couldn't find the right words to speak. After about 30 seconds, I took a deep breath and approached him. As I tried to gather my thoughts, my father-in-law spoke first. Charlotte, thank you for coming. I'm sorry to be such a burden, my father-in-law said, his face softening as he greeted me. Then a look of worry crossed his face, his expression darkening. Despite his illness, he was so considerate. It angered me that his own daughter, my sister-in-law, couldn't be bothered to be here. Please let me know if there's anything I can do for you, I replied. I knew I couldn't understand the pain of his illness, but I wanted to support him as best as I could. After finishing my morning tasks, I made the 40-minute journey to the hospital every day. I used to drive to work, but now I took the bus to spend more time with my father-in-law, even if it meant less sleep. The bus rides were calming, giving me a brief break and some energy for the tough days ahead. As I watched my father-in-law's health decline, I poured my heart and energy into making him comfortable. The medical procedures, like IVs and medication, were necessary but complicated. Unlike a simple IV for a cold, he needed a catheter placed near his heart through surgery below his collarbone. It was distressing, but it was the best we could do since he wasn't a candidate for surgery. Try this, I said, handing him a Walkman. My father-in-law loved karaoke and used to practice daily, but his hospitalization had stopped that. I wanted him to keep his passion for music alive, so I loaded his favorite songs onto the Walkman as a gift. He put on the headphones and pressed play. Instantly, his face lit up with joy. I thought I wouldn't be able to listen to music anymore. Thank you so much. Now I have to win another karaoke competition when I get discharged, my father-in-law said with a smile. I felt a bit relieved. Despite the unfamiliar hospital environment and tough daily treatments, he never complained. In fact, he seemed more worried about me. Sorry for causing you trouble and expenses. I wish we had traveled more with you and Joseph. I've always wanted to go to that place, he said, showing me a picture on his phone. It was a field full of lavender flowers. Wow, that's beautiful, I exclaimed. This place used to be just a field, but now it's turned into such a beautiful spot because of urban development. Lavender is my favorite flower. My father-in-law's eyes sparkled. I wished for his recovery even more urgently. From then on, I decided to stop by a florist before going to the hospital for my father-in-law, who loved flowers. After you left, I felt lonely, but having flowers around changes things. I found myself talking to the flowers, and the nurses looked at me like I was strange. We shared a good laugh over this. 2 weeks later, a feeding tube was attached to my father-in-law, who had been eating normally until then. His body was visibly turning more yellow, and his voice calling my name lost its energy. I had to suppress my fear and act strong, which was tough. I hadn't expected him to become bedridden in just 2 weeks after the cancer diagnosis. The disease's severity weighed heavily on me. I wanted to say, "Stay strong, Dad," but I knew he would be the most frustrated. He probably didn't want to admit that he was weak and would blame his body for not cooperating. His occasional smile showing strength was a relief for me. I often excused myself to the restroom, unable to hold back my tears. After washing my face with cold water to calm down, I returned to his room. Joseph also spent quality time with his father during breaks or days off. I found solace in alone time at a cafe in the hospital. Father-in-law seemed happier when talking with his son, so I made sure they had plenty of time together. An hour later, when I returned to the room, they were discussing insurance money. "I want my modest insurance money to go to Charlotte, who's taking great care of me," father-in-law said, turning towards me. He had changed the beneficiary to ensure that I would receive the money if something happened to him. Then the door flung open with a bang, and my sister-in-law stormed in, hurling abuse. "I heard your conversation. Why did you change the beneficiary to her? It used to be me. Change it back immediately or I'll spread the word that you're the worst father ever." Her words stunned both Joseph and me. Surprisingly, father-in-law defended her. "Okay, I understand. If you feel strongly about it, I'll change the beneficiary back to you. But promise me you'll stop saying hurtful things to Charlotte. She's Joseph's beloved wife, and I won't allow her to be hurt, no matter what," he said sternly. It seemed my sister-in-law's obsession with money was intense. Once father-in-law said that, she nodded quietly and left the room. I wanted to follow her out of disbelief, but my husband and father-in-law stopped me, so I reluctantly sat down. However, something about their behavior seemed off, leaving me with a big question mark in my mind. "Hey, why are you guys laughing?" I asked, puzzled by their amusement. My father-in-law began to explain between chuckles. "That silly girl really believed all my assets were tied up in insurance and went home." "Your plan worked well, Dad," he said, handing me 3 bank cards from a locked drawer. He revealed that they held a fortune beyond my wildest imagination, leaving me speechless with surprise. "I knew you were wealthy, father-in-law, but why were you only enrolled in a single minimal insurance plan?" I wondered aloud. However, he'd assured me that the insurance plan was decent, promising $10 million in case of his death. "All my assets are on these cards. I know I don't have much time left, so I want you to use it. I'm sorry for all the expenses I put you through with my hospital bills, flowers, and clothes," he explained sincerely. No, the money we spent isn't a big deal at all. We can't accept such a huge sum. It would feel like a punishment," I protested. "Just take it as a token of gratitude for taking care of me, and remember, keep this a secret from her," my father-in-law insisted. It seemed that, like us, he didn't think highly of my sister-in-law due to her selfish behavior and lack of consideration for family. That's why we had decided to leave her only the bare minimum, if anything, if something happened to him. "Won't you accept my offer?" Faced with their earnest gazes, I found it hard to refuse. I felt guilty but agreed nonetheless. 2 weeks later, following my father-in-law's wish to spend his remaining time in a more home-like environment receiving palliative care, we moved into a hospice. We reached out to my sister-in-law just in case, but her only response was, "Good for you." It was truly an eye-rolling moment. Despite her absence, the warm conversation between the 3 of us continued. "I'm sorry for causing you trouble with my secret, but there's one more thing. Did you know my father was Martino Aaron?" My father-in-law revealed. "What do you mean, the famous singer? I've seen him on the hit nostalgia song show." "Are you serious?" "That's news to me," I exclaimed. This was big news. Even Joseph didn't know. Apparently, it was not public knowledge that my father-in-law was Martino Aaron's son. He was a secret child, and because Martino Aaron was a public figure, it was kept under wraps. However, Martino Aaron apparently doted on my father-in-law behind the scenes and shared his wealth with him before he passed away. "When I'm gone, go here," my father-in-law said, handing us a piece of paper with an address written on it. He kept evading our questions for more details. A month later, after living his final days at the hospice, my father-in-law peacefully passed away. "Father-in-law," I sobbed, calling for him one more time, but there was no answer. Gratitude welled up in me for how he had always treated me like his own daughter, and tears streamed down my face as we stood by his side, leaning on Joseph for support. At the funeral, my sister-in-law arrived and began crying loudly, a stark contrast to her previous attitude. She talked to the attendees as if she deeply cared for her father. I wanted to expose her true intentions of only caring about money, but I knew it wouldn't make my father-in-law happy. Instead, I decided to think of her as a stranger, which eased my mind somewhat. After the funeral, she didn't bother us, and we didn't bother with her either. A week after my father-in-law's passing, Joseph and I went to the location written on the piece of paper he had given us. We were astonished by what we found. "What is this?" we both exclaimed as we stood before an enormous, opulent mansion, unlike anything we had ever seen before. Unsure of what to do, we decided to explore the vast gardens first. Suddenly, a woman emerged from the house, startling me so much that I fell backward. "I'm sorry, I didn't think anyone was here," she said with a kind smile as she invited us inside. The interior was extravagant, with marble, diamonds, and ornate decorations. It felt like we had stepped into a dream. The woman guided us to a room with plush chairs where we sat down. As I tried to process the reality of the situation, she began to speak slowly. "I've been the caretaker of this house. Your father owned it and used it to entertain his friends from time to time. Every time someone would visit, I would come to assist. But now, there's no longer a need for me to be here. Your father's final wish was to hand over the ownership of this house to you, Joseph and Charlotte." After saying this, she handed us a set of keys, a map of the house, and a notebook detailing the location of various valuables. "I'm glad to have met the people your father treasured the most. I wish you happiness," she said before leaving. After 2 hours of exploring, we found a letter from my father-in-law in a desk drawer in the study. It stated that we could live in or sell the house as we wished. We couldn't express our gratitude to him enough for leaving us not only a fortune, but also this grand mansion. With him no longer with us, all we could do was continue living in this world for his sake. The following month, we decided to visit a hotel that my father-in-law had wanted to go to for 15 years. On the way there, we played his favorite music and talked to a photo of him. "Father-in-law, we're finally going on a trip together. Let's have a blast today," I said suddenly, and a leaf fell and stuck to our car window, shaking lightly. It felt like father-in-law had answered us, which made me happy. 3 hours later, we arrived at the historic hotel he had spoken of. Nestled in a quiet spot surrounded by peaceful nature, photos of several past presidents adorned the walls, adding to its recognition and importance. After we were shown to our spacious room, we sat down on the sofa, enjoying the welcome drinks and fresh fruits. "It's been a while since we've been able to enjoy a leisurely trip like this," Joseph remarked. "Yeah, well, Dad's with us today," I replied. It had been a while since Joseph and I shared a meaningful glance, and I couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed. After indulging in the spa and exploring the hotel, it was finally time for the meal we had eagerly awaited since we had ordered for 3. The room service staff, upon delivering our meal, was quite surprised when we explained the situation. They nodded in understanding with a kind smile. After reminiscing about my father-in-law for a while, they even offered us a complimentary bottle of wine. "This is delicious, just like Dad would say," I exclaimed. I wasn't used to drinking much, so I got a bit tipsy that day, and my memory became a bit hazy. However, Joseph, who had a higher tolerance for alcohol, remembered my actions and recounted them to me the next morning. "Last night, you kept caressing Dad's picture and saying, 'I love you.' You've said that to me only a few times. I felt a bit jealous of Dad," he said, laughing. As we drove along a different route than the day before, we shared this humorous anecdote. Then suddenly, we spotted it. Lavender blooming as far as the eye could see. There was no mistaking it. This was the place my father-in-law had shown us in the photo. Embraced by the gentle beauty of the lavender, I felt invigorated, no longer trapped in sadness, but eager to face forward. Dad told me once that Mom used to gaze at the lavender a lot before she passed away, Joseph shared. Realizing that my father-in-law had brought us here out of love for his wife touched my heart deeply. Since then, we've started bringing lavender to the grave. It has become a precious flower for our family, warming our hearts and spirits. Once we returned to our normal lives, we began spending our weekends in the luxurious house my father-in-law left us. Thanks to this, Every week felt like a vacation. My love for Joseph deepened and my gratitude to my father-in-law overflowed. I can't count how many times tears of joy soaked my clothes. Fast forward a month later, it was a weekday around 7 p.m. After Joseph came home and took a bath, I was preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. When I checked the monitor, I saw my sister-in-law. She rarely comes to our house. I wanted to pretend we weren't home, but with Joseph's car in the driveway and the lights on, that wasn't possible. As I hesitated, my impatient sister-in-law began pounding on the door. Worried about the neighbors noticing, I quickly turned off the stove and hurried to the door. As soon as I opened it, she started yelling before the door fully closed. "Where the hell are you two?" "On the weekend." It seemed she had come to our house over the weekend, but Joseph and I weren't there. I couldn't tell her why, so I remained silent as she glared at me threateningly. All right, come this way," I said, leading her to the living room. I didn't want her lingering at the front door, so I intended to let Joseph handle her. Just then, Joseph, fresh from his bath, appeared at the entrance, and I sighed in relief. "What brings you here around dinner time?" Joseph asked straightforwardly. As I watched them, he led her to the living room, and the conversation continued. "I came to light incense for Dad at the family altar over the weekend, but you two were nowhere to be found," she said self-righteously. Her tone still irked me. Then, out of the blue, Joseph dropped the bombshell. "I actually spent my weekend dating Charlotte, trying to pass on all the love that Dad gave me. Sorry if this doesn't sit well with you. A sister who has to deal with her husband being lovey-dovey with another woman," Joseph said. My voice and sister-in-law's overlapped in shock. "What?" she exclaimed. Sister-in-law was visibly shaken by this unexpected revelation. "There's no way. What are you talking about?" "There's no way he could be interested in any other woman but me," sister-in-law protested. Immediately after, Joseph took out his mobile phone from his pocket and showed a picture to sister-in-law. Curiosity piqued, I peeked at the photo, and sure enough, it was sister-in-law's husband arm in arm with another woman. Sister-in-law's fury and sadness reached the peak, and she seemed to stop caring about me and Joseph. As soon as she got the picture forwarded from Joseph, she stormed off. The next day and the day after, when I asked Joseph, who didn't talk about sister-in-law, what happened to the couple, he said he didn't know because he had blocked sister-in-law's contact. "I don't consider her a sibling anymore. All I want is to live a peaceful daily life with you," Joseph said. Fast forward a month later, while out shopping with Joseph as usual, we bumped into a neighbor from where sister-in-law lived. Apparently, the sister-in-law couple was in the midst of divorce discussions, with the husband completely out of love with sister-in-law, and a reluctant sister-in-law still not wanting to split despite the infidelity. As much as it sounds like a tough situation, I've decided to stop worrying about sister-in-law and just focus on living my own life. As long as I have Joseph, I have nothing to fear. Father-in-law always used to say the key to happiness is to laugh a lot and think out loud. I'm going to go back to my old job soon, but I plan on adhering to father-in-law's advice and enjoying life to the fullest, even for father-in-law's sake. Joseph and I both love to sing, and we've promised to participate in a karaoke competition together. Our goal: to make it to the same podium that father-in-law did, to reach the top as we let our singing voices resonate towards the heavens.